There is a specific moment in a person's financial life that most people never talk about. It is not the day you get your first paycheck. It is not the day you pay off your debt. It is not even the day you finally make six figures. It is the day you check your bank account, and instead of immediately closing the app with that familiar knot in your stomach, you feel something completely different. You feel okay. Not rich. Not set for life. Not celebrating. Just okay. And if you have never felt that feeling, if every single month still feels like a careful calculation of what you can and cannot afford, then this video is for you. Because there is a specific number that creates that feeling. A number that most financial advice skips entirely because it is not glamorous enough. It is not $1 million. It is not six figures in your investment account. It is $20,000. And the reason that number changes everything has almost nothing to do with what $20,000 can buy you. It has everything to do with what it does to your brain. By the end of this video, you are going to understand the hidden mathematics behind that number. Why it is the most important financial milestone most people never intentionally chase. And exactly what happens to your life, your decisions, your career, and your relationship with money the moment you cross it. Before we dive in, let's discuss about the threshold nobody talks about. Most financial expert talks about the concept that is built around two kinds of milestones. The small ones, pay off your credit card, build a starter emergency fund, stop eating out so much. And the enormous ones, hit $1 million, retire early, achieve financial freedom. What gets almost no attention is the middle. The specific early milestones that actually separate people who will build wealth from people who will spend their lives working hard without ever quite getting there. $20,000 is the most important of these invisible milestones. And understanding why requires understanding something fundamental about how wealth actually builds, which is nothing like how most people imagine it. The two financial worlds. There are two fundamentally different financial worlds that people live in, and the difference between them is not primarily income. It is not even primarily spending habits. The difference is a number. A cushion, a buffer between where you are and where disaster begins. In the first world, you are living without that buffer. Every financial decision is made in the shadow of what happens if something goes wrong. Every expense is evaluated against the question of whether you can cover it right now. Every unexpected bill, every car repair, every medical cost is a crisis, not because the amount is necessarily catastrophic, but because there is no cushion to absorb it. In this world, you take the first job offer that comes along because you cannot afford to wait. You stay in situations that are not working because leaving feels too risky. You make short-term decisions constantly, because the short term is the only horizon that feels real. In the second world, you have a buffer. You have some time. You have options. You can evaluate job offers instead of accepting the first one. You can negotiate instead of accepting what you are offered. You can wait for the right opportunity instead of taking the wrong one out of necessity. The line between these two worlds is not at $1 million. It is not even at 100,000. For most people, the line is somewhere around $20,000. That is the point where the financial world you live in changes. The story of two people, same income, different worlds. Both of them earn $48,000 a year. Both of them are 27 years old. Both of them live in the same city with roughly the same cost of living. The first person has $1,100 in their checking account and nothing else. Their savings account technically exists but has been at zero for most of the past year. The second person has $22,000 across a savings account and a basic investment account. They do not own a home. They do not have an inheritance. They built it themselves over 3 years of deliberate, consistent saving. On paper, these two people look almost identical. Same income, same approximate lifestyle, similar apartment, similar car, similar daily expenses. But their financial lives are not the same. The first person responds to a job offer from a better company with a 10% pay increase but a 3-month delay before the start date. They cannot take it. They need income continuously. The gap is not survivable. The second person takes the offer immediately. They live off their savings for 3 months, start the new job, and arrive at their 28th birthday earning 12% more than they would have if the buffer had not existed. Over the next 5 years, that income difference compounds. The career trajectory diverges. The investment contributions diverge. The net worth gap between these two people, who earned the same income at 27, reaches 6 figures by their early 30s. Not because of talent, not because of luck, because of $22,000. This is the threshold, and understanding exactly how it works is what the rest of this video is about. Survival mode. The hidden cost of living without a cushion. The concept of survival mode in psychology is typically discussed in the context of trauma, stress, and clinical anxiety. But financial researchers have documented a version of survival mode that operates at a much lower intensity level, one that most people living without a financial cushion are in continuously without fully recognizing it. It does not feel like a crisis. It feels like normal. It feels like always being slightly careful. Always doing the mental math. Always carrying a low-level awareness of what happens if something unexpected occurs this month. And this low-level survival orientation has measurable costs that compound invisibly over years. The cognitive cost of financial scarcity. Economists Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, in their research on scarcity published in the early 2010s, documented something that permanently changed how behavioral economists think about poverty and financial struggle. Scarcity, specifically the experience of not having enough, does not just create financial problems. It actively reduces cognitive capacity. In a series of studies, they found that people experiencing financial scarcity performed significantly worse on cognitive tests measuring IQ and executive function than the same people when not under financial stress. Not because they were less intelligent, but because the mental bandwidth consumed by financial worry directly reduced the cognitive resources available for everything else. They estimated that the cognitive drain of financial scarcity is equivalent to losing approximately 13 IQ points. Not permanently, but continuously, for as long as the scarcity persists. 13 points. That is not a trivial effect. That is the difference between making consistently sound decisions and making consistently suboptimal ones. Across every area of your life. Not because you are failing to try. Because the mental resources required for good decision-making are being consumed by the background noise of financial insecurity. This is the hidden cost of not having a cushion. Not just the financial emergencies it fails to prevent. The quality of every decision you make while you are living without it. The jobs you do not take, the raises you do not ask for. The practical expression of financial survival mode shows up most clearly in career behavior. A person without a financial cushion accepts the first reasonable job offer they receive. They do not negotiate aggressively because they need the job more than the company needs them, and some part of them knows it. They do not leave jobs that are not working because the risk of a gap in income is not survivable. They do not pursue the better opportunity that requires a short period of uncertainty to capture. Each of these is a small career decision. And each of them, individually, seems entirely rational. But across a decade of work, these decisions compound. The person who negotiated their starting salary up by $5,000, because they had 6 months of savings and could wait, earns more than the person who accepted the first offer not just this year but every year for the rest of their career. Because salaries compound on themselves. A $5,000 starting salary difference becomes a larger percentage raise in absolute terms each year. It affects bonuses that are calculated as a percentage of salary. It affects retirement contributions that are capped as a percentage of income. Over 20 years of work, a $5,000 salary gap at entry level can produce a net worth difference of several $100,000. All of it traceable back to whether or not you had a cushion on the day you negotiated. The relationships that drain because money is tight. There is a social dimension to financial survival mode that is almost never discussed in personal finance content, because it is uncomfortable and does not fit neatly into the framework of individual financial choices. Financial stress is one of the most consistent predictors of relationship difficulty that researchers have documented. Not because money is the most important thing in a relationship, but because the stress it creates, the arguments it produces, the decisions it forces, and the options it removes place genuine strain on every relationship it touches. People in financial survival mode make social decisions from scarcity too. They decline social opportunities they cannot afford and feel the social cost of that withdrawal. They stay in living situations or relationships that are not working because the financial alternative is too frightening. They experience the compound anxiety of knowing that any unexpected expense will create a crisis, and living with that knowledge every day. The cushion does not solve relationship problems, but it removes an enormous source of ongoing stress that makes every other problem harder to solve. $20,000 is not a cure, but it is, for most people, the point at which the relationship with money shifts from a source of daily stress to something that can be managed with occasional attention rather than constant vigilance. Why the math accelerates, the compound effect nobody explains clearly. Here's where the mathematics of $20,000 becomes genuinely interesting, and genuinely motivating, if you let yourself sit with it long enough to feel what it actually means. Most people understand compound interest in a vague, general way. Money grows. The longer you wait, the more it grows. Start early. Yes, fine. But this general understanding misses something specific and powerful about the early accumulation phase that changes how you should think about building your first $20,000. The shrinking timeline, how the math actually works. Let us run through the actual numbers with a concrete example. Imagine you are saving and investing $1,000 every month and earning an 8% annual return, which is a conservative estimate of long-term diversified investment returns. Your first $20,000 takes approximately 19 months to accumulate. A year and 7 months of consistent discipline. That is the hardest stretch. Every dollar is earned by you, through work, through sacrifice, through choosing not to spend it on something else. Your second $20,000 takes approximately 17 months. Not 19, 17. You did not work harder. You did not earn more. You did not take on more risk. The only thing that changed is that you had the first $20,000 already invested and generating returns alongside your contributions. Your third $20,000 takes 15 months. Your fourth takes about 13. By the time you are working toward your 10th increment of $20,000, building toward a $200,000 portfolio, each additional $20,000 arrives in approximately 9 months. And here is where the mathematics becomes almost difficult to believe, even though it is just arithmetic. Once you have $400,000 invested at 8% annual returns, you generate $20,000 every 5 months from the investment returns alone. Without contributing a single additional dollar of your own income. The exact amount of wealth that took you 19 months to build from scratch, months of sacrifice, of choosing not to spend, of deliberate discipline, is now arriving automatically every 5 months, generated entirely by the money that is already there. This is compound interest not as a slogan but as a lived financial reality. And it begins. The acceleration begins. The timeline starts shrinking, the returns start contributing meaningfully, at $20,000. Below that threshold, the compound effect is real but small enough that it barely registers. Above it, it begins to feel like something. The opportunity cost reality. There is a parallel mathematical concept that does not get discussed nearly as often as compound interest but is equally important for understanding why early accumulation matters so much. Opportunity cost. Every purchase you make is not just a cost. It is also the loss of what that money would have become if it had been invested instead. A $30,000 car purchase is not a $30,000 cost. That $30,000, invested at 8% annual returns over 20 years, becomes approximately $140,000. The car cost you $30,000 up front and $140,000 in future wealth. Total cost, $170,000. For transportation. This is not an argument for never buying a car. People need transportation, but it is an argument for being extraordinarily deliberate about how much transportation costs, because every dollar spent on a depreciating asset is a dollar removed from the compound growth engine that is trying to build your financial future. Once you have $20,000 built up and you start watching it grow, this calculation becomes visceral rather than theoretical. You begin to feel the opportunity cost in a way that changes how you evaluate purchases. Not all purchases. The math applies everywhere, and taking it to its logical extreme produces paralysis rather than wealth. But the big recurring costs, housing, transportation, the major lifestyle decisions, these deserve the opportunity cost lens. Because they are where most of the financial damage actually happens. Walking away money, the power of having options. There is a term used in negotiation theory called the BATNA. It stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. It is the option you fall back on if the negotiation fails. In financial life, $20,000 is your BATNA. It is the answer to the question, what happens if this does not work out? And having a good answer to that question, a concrete, survivable answer, changes every negotiation you enter. Every salary conversation, every business decision, every career risk you consider. How having money makes you better at getting money. This sounds circular, and it is. But it is a real phenomenon, and understanding the mechanism is important. People who have a financial cushion negotiate differently. Not just more confidently, though that is true. They negotiate from a genuinely different position. When you are negotiating a salary without a cushion, your situation creates an invisible but powerful pressure toward acceptance. You need the job. You need the income. The risk of the negotiation failing has real, immediate consequences for your life. When you are negotiating with 6 months of expenses in the bank, you can afford for the negotiation to fail. You can walk away. You can take the time to find something better. And the other party in the negotiation, if they are experienced, can often sense this. Desperation is legible, so is the absence of it. The person negotiating from security gets better outcomes not just because they ask for more but because the quality of their negotiating position is genuinely different. They are playing from a position of choice. And choice, in almost every domain of professional life, is the foundation of power. The jobs people do not know they can ask for. A woman named Sandra worked as a graphic designer at a mid-size company for 4 years. She was consistently excellent at her work. She received positive performance reviews. She had been promoted once. For 4 of those years, she had no meaningful savings. Every raise she received was immediately absorbed into a slightly more comfortable lifestyle. She never quite asked for the raise she felt she deserved, because every time she thought about the conversation, she thought about what would happen if it went badly. She could not afford to have it go badly. In her 5th year, Sandra built $21,000 in savings through a deliberate 18-month effort. She contributed a fixed amount from every paycheck before spending anything else. She reduced several recurring expenses that had accumulated over time. She received a small bonus and invested it rather than spending it. When the next performance review arrived, Sandra asked for a salary increase of 15% rather than the 4 or 5% she had previously accepted. She prepared data on market rates for her role. She had a clear case for her contribution to the company's projects. And critically, she had decided in advance that if the company declined, she would begin looking for another position seriously. The company offered 12%. Sandra accepted. The 12% increase on her salary represented more income in 1 year than the 18 months of disciplined saving that had built her cushion. The cushion did not just save her in an emergency. It paid for itself, in higher income, within 12 months of being built. Sandra's outcome is not unusual. It is the predictable result of negotiating from a position of genuine choice rather than concealed desperation. The cushion creates options. Options create better outcomes. Better outcomes fund more cushion. The cycle is real, and it begins at a number most people have never consciously targeted. How the wealthy think about early saving versus early spending. There is a specific mindset difference between people who build wealth early and people who build it late, or not at all, that shows up most clearly in how they think about the relationship between consumption and investment in their 20s and early 30s. Most people treat their early income as the time when they can finally afford things they could not afford before. The better apartment, the nicer car, the more frequent dining out, the upgraded wardrobe. This is a completely understandable response to earning more, and it is also one of the most expensive financial decisions most people make, because they make it during the period when their invested dollars have the most time to compound. The people who build significant wealth early tend to share a different instinct. They treat their early income as the most valuable income they will ever have, not because it is the largest, which it usually is not, but because it has the most time to grow. A dollar invested at 25 has, at 8% annual returns, approximately 40 times the purchasing power of a dollar spent at 25 by the time the investor reaches 65. Not 4 times, 40 times. Understanding this at 25, and making decisions that reflect that understanding, is one of the most powerful financial advantages available to anyone. And it costs nothing except the willingness to delay consumption that would have provided temporary pleasure rather than lasting wealth. The identity shift, how $20,000 changes who you think you are. Everything covered so far in this video has been about what $20,000 does to your financial situation. This section is about something different. What it does to you. Because the most powerful thing about reaching a meaningful financial milestone is not the number itself. It is the evidence it creates about your own character. Proving something to yourself. Building $20,000 from zero, through deliberate consistent effort, requires something that is easy to describe and genuinely difficult to do. It requires choosing the future version of yourself over the present version, repeatedly, for an extended period of time. Every month that a transfer goes to savings before discretionary spending begins as a choice. A choice to invest in a version of yourself that does not yet exist over the version that exists right now and would prefer to spend the money on something enjoyable today. Making that choice once is discipline. Making it for 18 months, through salary increases that make spending more tempting, through social events that cost money, through the advertising ecosystem that is constantly creating new desires, that is identity. By the time you have $20,000, you have proven something to yourself that cannot be faked or approximated. You have proven that you are the kind of person who builds things. Not someone who intends to. Not someone who plans to. Someone who actually does. And that proof changes every financial decision you make afterward. Not because of the money. Because of what building the money tells you about yourself. From threats to opportunities, how the brain reorients. There is a well-documented shift in cognitive orientation that accompanies the move from financial scarcity to financial cushion. When you are living without a financial buffer, your brain's threat detection system is continuously engaged around money. Every unexpected expense is evaluated as a potential threat. Every financial decision is filtered through the question of what happens if this goes wrong. This threat orientation is appropriate when threats are real and resources are genuinely limited. But it has a side effect that is financially damaging. It makes it very difficult to see and evaluate opportunities. The research on this is consistent. People in a threat-oriented mental state are less creative, less able to consider long-term consequences, and less capable of evaluating complex trade-offs than the same people in a non-threatened state. Once the cushion exists, the threat orientation gradually relaxes. And in its place, something different emerges. The ability to notice opportunities. The colleague who mentions an investment in passing. The business idea that keeps occurring to you. The job posting for a position that would require a short period of financial uncertainty to pursue. These things existed before the cushion, but they were filtered out by a brain focused on managing immediate threats. With the cushion, they begin to register, and some of them turn out to be transformative. The micro-decision liberation. One of the most underappreciated benefits of financial security is the liberation from micro-decision fatigue. When money is tight, every small spending decision requires a calculation. Can I afford this? What else needs to happen this month? What is the buffer after this? These calculations are not just time-consuming. They are cognitively expensive. They consume the limited mental bandwidth that could otherwise be directed toward work, relationships, creativity, and the larger decisions that actually determine the direction of a life. Research in behavioral economics has demonstrated repeatedly that the number of decisions a person makes per day directly affects the quality of their subsequent decisions. This is why some highly effective people wear the same outfit every day or eat the same breakfast, not because they cannot afford variety but because eliminating trivial decisions preserves cognitive resources for consequential ones. Financial security does not eliminate decisions, but it eliminates a specific category of exhausting, anxiety-adjacent micro-decisions that consume disproportionate mental resources relative to their financial significance. You stop doing the math on whether you can afford a coffee. Not because you are being careless. Because you have already established that your savings are on track and your bills are covered, and within that context, the coffee does not require calculation. The mental energy that was consumed by those calculations becomes available for better uses. Now, let's talk about how to actually build $20,000, the practical framework. Everything discussed so far is meaningless unless it leads somewhere practical. This section is about the actual mechanics of building $20,000, not with motivational slogans but with specific, operational decisions that move the number consistently in the right direction. Step 1. Establish the number as a conscious target. The first and most underrated step is simply to make $20,000 a deliberate, written, dated target. Not a vague intention, not a general aspiration, a specific goal. I will have $20,000 by this date. Research on goal setting consistently shows that specific, written goals with defined timelines are achieved at substantially higher rates than goals that exist only as intentions. The specificity forces a plan. The timeline creates urgency. The writing creates commitment. Once you have the target, work backward. Divide 20,000 by the number of months until your target date. That is your required monthly savings contribution. Then build your budget around that contribution, not around it. This is the pay yourself first principle in its most operational form. The savings contribution is not what remains after expenses. It is what comes out first, automatically, before any discretionary spending begins. Step 2. Find the income and expense levers. Building $20,000 faster requires moving two levers simultaneously: increasing income and reducing expenses. Most financial advice focuses almost entirely on the expense side. Cut this, cancel that, stop buying coffee. And expense reduction matters, but it has a hard floor. You cannot reduce expenses below zero, and most people who are genuinely careful with money are already well below the easy wins. The income side has no ceiling. Additional income, from a second job, from freelance work in your area of expertise, from selling things you own but no longer use, from a skill that commands a market rate, can accelerate the $20,000 timeline dramatically. An extra $500 a month of income directed entirely to savings turns a 40-month journey into a 27-month one. Same starting point, same target, 13 months faster because of one income lever. On the expense side, the highest leverage reductions are almost always the large recurring costs that people treat as fixed because they have been stable for a long time. Housing is usually the largest. A less expensive living situation, a smaller apartment, a roommate, a different neighborhood, can free up hundreds of dollars per month that would otherwise be invisible in the budget because they are consumed automatically by a rent payment that was established years ago and never reconsidered. Transportation is the second. The difference between a car payment plus insurance plus maintenance on a newer vehicle and the equivalent costs on a reliable older paid-off vehicle can be $300 to $500 per month. That difference, invested consistently, is the $20,000 cushion on its own within 3 years. Step 3. Automate before you can spend it. The behavioral research is unambiguous on this point. Saving that happens automatically, before discretionary spending begins, is maintained at dramatically higher rates than saving that depends on a deliberate transfer decision at the end of the month. The reason is straightforward. End-of-month saving requires making a decision in a depleted state, after a month of decisions, with whatever is left over after spending. That decision competes with every reason not to save that the month has produced. Beginning-of-month saving requires no decision in the moment. The transfer happens because it was set up in advance. The account receives the contribution before the discretionary spending context is activated. And then life is built around what remains. Set up the automatic transfer on the day income arrives. Not 2 days later, not at the end of the month. On arrival day. Make the destination account separate enough from your daily spending account that transferring money back out of it requires a conscious action. Not impossible. Emergencies happen, but not the path of least resistance. The architecture of the system, not the strength of your intention, determines how consistently the savings build. Step 4. Protect the number once you hit it. Here is the part most financial expert misses entirely. The $20,000 milestone is not a reward to be spent. It is the foundation of everything that comes after it. And the most common mistake people make after reaching it is treating the arrival at the milestone as permission to stop the behavior that produced it. They upgrade the car. They take the expensive holiday they have been postponing. They move to a more expensive apartment. They buy the thing they have been wanting. And within a year, they are back below 10,000. Back in the zone where the psychological benefits of the cushion are diminished. Back in the zone where the career decisions are constrained by financial necessity. The $20,000 is not a milestone to be celebrated by spending it. It is a floor to be maintained while the building continues above it. Celebrate the milestone, genuinely. The discipline required to build it deserves acknowledgement. But celebrate in ways that do not dismantle what you built. A dinner, a day trip, an experience that costs $100 or $200 and honors the achievement without dismantling the foundation. Then continue, because $20,000 is the beginning of the acceleration, not the destination. Step 5. Understand what comes after. Once the cushion is established and the savings habit is automated, the next question is where the additional savings go. For most people in most countries, the highest priority destination after the emergency fund is a tax-advantaged retirement account, a 401k in the United States, an ISA in the United Kingdom, an RRSP in Canada, a superannuation fund in Australia. The reason is not primarily about retirement. It is about the mathematics of tax-deferred or tax-free compound growth. Money growing inside a tax-advantaged account does not lose a percentage of its gains to taxes every year. That means the compound growth operates on the full amount, year after year, without the annual tax drag that affects taxable accounts. Over 20 or 30 years, the difference between tax-advantaged and taxable investment growth, on the same contributions at the same return rate, is substantial enough to represent a significant portion of total retirement wealth. The $20,000 cushion gives you the stability to contribute to these accounts without anxiety about needing the money for unexpected expenses. The cushion and the long-term investment account work together, one providing security, one providing growth. And together, they create the financial architecture that turns an ordinary income into an extraordinary financial life over the time horizon most people have available. The most important financial decision you have not made yet? We started this video with a feeling. The feeling of checking your account and, instead of closing the app with that familiar anxiety, actually feeling okay. By now you understand that feeling is not random. It is not luck. It is not a function of how much you earn or how expensive your city is or how generous your employer is with benefits. It is a function of a specific number. A cushion, a threshold that separates the financial world of options from the financial world of constraints. $20,000 is not the destination. It is the beginning of a very different journey. One where the math works in your favor instead of against you, where the career decisions are made from choice instead of necessity, where the compound effect is finally large enough to feel rather than just trust. The people who reach it do not typically have extraordinary incomes. They have an ordinary income and an extraordinary clarity about what they are building toward. They decided, specifically and deliberately, to build to this number. They automated the savings before the spending could absorb it. They found the income and expense levers that made the timeline shorter. They protected the number when they reached it. And they continued. That is the entire story of every person who has moved from financial survival to financial freedom. Not a secret investment strategy. Not a lucky break. A deliberate, specific decision to build the thing that changes everything first. The most important financial decision you can make right now is not which stock to buy or which investment to choose or which debt to pay off first. It is to set the target. $20,000. Specific date. Automatic transfer. Everything else follows from that. If this video changed the way you think about early savings, if you are seeing $20,000 as a strategic target rather than a vague aspiration for the first time, then you have already done something that most people never do. You have connected a number to a meaning. But here is the thing worth sitting with as this video ends. The $20,000 milestone is the beginning of building wealth. But it is not the beginning of financial intelligence. Because most people who build their first $20,000 then make the same expensive mistake. They do not know what to do with it next. They put it somewhere safe and leave it there. And safe, in the current economic environment, means slowly losing ground to inflation. In the next video, we are going to look at exactly what comes after the cushion. The specific sequence of financial moves that turns $20,000 of security into $200,000 of genuine long-term wealth. Not through complicated strategies. Not through high-risk investments. Through a specific, simple, documented sequence that has been replicated by ordinary people with ordinary incomes across decades of investment research. The sequence matters as much as the contributions. And most people get it wrong in a way that costs them significantly over the long term. If you want to understand the sequence, do not miss the next video. Thank you for watching.